Welcome to the Checkered Shorts Podcast, a podcast of three fraternity brothers reconnected by their love of IndyCar. Join us for grid-rival IndyCar fantasy talk, predictions for upcoming races, and reactions to race day results and all things IndyCar. Let's go racing! All right, welcome back to Checkered Shorts, episode 6. This episode will be released on Wednesday, so we thank you for continuing to tune in. If this is your first time joining us, we encourage you to go back and look at past episodes. You know, we just started this at the start of the season, so not much to catch up on, but we have some good stuff to start. You know, we appreciate you guys sticking with us as we go through a little bit of growing pains of navigating what it's like to be creators. It really doesn't fit into anything that we typically do. But yeah, we appreciate you coming along for the ride. Episode 4 had some great highlights, so that's one you probably want to check out. We're starting to hit our stride a little bit and understand how this thing works. So Welcome. Episode 6, Checkered Shorts. Today is going to be our first pod with IndyCar 101, trying to bring the newbies like myself up to speed on all things IndyCar. So today we're going to talk about tracks. You know, what's the difference? How do they choose them? And what the schedule looks like. So we'll let you guys start. You guys got a lot more background than me, so I know we got several different types of tracks, and let's hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, just as an intro, I think when we boil down the IndyCar tracks, we really look at, in the current schedule, we look at 4 types. You know, we were just at St. Pete, which is a street course. Then we go next race at Thermal is a road course. Obviously, we've got some short ovals, and those come later in the year. And then standing all by itself is Indianapolis Motor Speedway. 4 straightaways and 4 corners. So that's kind of the overview of the 4. Pat, if you want to jump in and talk about one particular one of those.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of them have their advantages, right? To just an overview of them. Personally, I think road courses, it's a lot more follow the leader just because, but there can be some, IMS road course, love IMS road course. It can get pretty Alex Palou-ish type of thing. Will Power is really good there. To me, street courses are a little bit more exciting, just tighter corners. A lot more can happen. And then ovals are ovals, man. That's how, that's IndyCar, baby. 3 of us, I think, enjoy the ovals the most, just when you're getting side-by-side racing for laps and laps on end. That's kind of how I got into it with it. So that's, there's advantages and disadvantages, all of them. But, the ovals where my heart is, my allegiance is.
Well, the ovals, that's where you find the top speeds, those big eye-popping top speeds that make IndyCar the fastest racing out there.
Yeah, I think I want to go back to street courses real quick because that's what we just came from St. Pete. I think for those that are new to the sport, like Keith said, like he is, those are temporary, right? Like they're basically taking a downtown area. Sometimes they connect them to an airport, like they do at St. Pete, and they spend weeks or a month putting that course together and putting those those concrete slabs around the track, which there you talked about tight corners and crashes and pieces like that, but it's really temporary. They jump in, they close down a section of a city for a period of time. They're normally pretty tight, and you don't have the top speeds, but you get a lot of acceleration, a lot of braking, like really hard on tires because they're coming into a lot of 90-degree turns and so it's a fine line that they're working in those street courses to make sure they keep it off the wall and keep it tight as they come around there.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy the street course. I know we talked about ovals because the vantage point, especially being there as a spectator, totally different. But the street courses got a lot of moments that'll pucker you up a little bit.
For sure.
The girth of the cars is so that it's hard to squeeze a pass in some of these street courses.
Yeah,
Alex Rossi there. You're not listening to his latest podcast.
Street courses are awesome, but I mean, you got to remember Nashville, not last year, the year before. So what was that? 23, like 50%, literally 50% of the laps were under yellow, ran under yellow. So it's a little give and take, man. It's really good racing on some street courses. But I mean, if you're running 50% of the laps under yellow, like, what are we doing? We got to figure something else out here.
Well, we see some pretty good pileups, though, wouldn't you say, on street courses? When we look at the schedule today, as it is, like, that's where the big pileups come in, because if a guy goes in there and misses a corner, it's so tight. I remember some Nashville races. We saw Marcus Ericsson go flying in the air and ended up winning a race. Or, how many times have we seen a pile of like 5 or 6 cars that get buried in? I remember a Grosjean corner one time where he lost it and ended up in the tire barrier, and 4 or 5 people came in right behind him. We see some, those are just because they're so tight and no room for error again.
Yeah, the onboard camera stuff highlights from week 1 at St. Pete on the lap 1 wreck. We talked quite a bit about Will Power. Looked like he caused that accident, and he was referring back to history and experience that you could come into that turn with a little more speed. When you watch the onboard, you can kind of see what he's talking about, because the visibility isn't really there to know that someone's not coming out of that turn with more speed. And I can see, even with a guy with experience of Power, how you can end up in the back end of someone.
Well, and these guys are, I mean, this is how good they are. There was one caution. Yes. Okay. Beginning of the race, probably obviously the biggest percentage to have a wreck, not one caution after that. So I was watching the COTA race afterwards, and they had like the 30-minute half-hour pre-race, and they were talking about, well, there's going to be a lot of cautions in this race. I'm like, what's the point? Like, IndyCar drivers are some of the elite best drivers in the world. I want good racing. Cautions, tend to pile them up, which is good for all of the spectators, but they're so good to where they're not needing the cautions too. And NASCAR was kind of making a jab at the IndyCar, like, well, we're going to have a lot more cautions here in NASCAR today. I'm like, let's just race, man.
Yeah. Well, and there's a difference there too, right? Like, COTA's really, and it helps us transition kind of the next course. COTA is more of a road course, right? It's more sweeping. You don't have those walls right next to, there's a lot of runoff. Like, so, if there is that type of the place where things get tight, like there's room for people to move. So when you get a road course, you do get a lot more of those sweeping turns. You get some elevation change, which a street course typically is pretty flat. But then you get a little higher speeds though on road courses, because you don't have those like real hard braking zones for the most part. You might have some hairpins and things like that, but for the most part, it's a quicker track, smoother. You mentioned it, guys like Alex Palou, Scott Dixon are pretty good on those road courses because they just are very smooth drivers.
Correct. Yeah. And you're taking turns at, 120, 130, 140 compared to like an 80 type of thing. That's with no power steering. It's not easy to do. I've seen these drivers like Devlin DeFrancesco. I just saw a picture of him. He might be 5 foot. Like, he's not a tall dude. Like so it tells you what you have to whip these things around.
Yeah. When the guys talked about it in this offseason, like they said that the guys probably averaged 10 pounds of muscle that they put on this winter, just getting ready because of that hybrid from last year. They realized, wow, that extra 100 pounds in the car is making a big difference. So they need, as they're trying to muscle that steering wheel around those turns. So that's a good point, Pat.
So do you think on the road courses that some of the guys have a tendency to be more aggressive because you're not going to blow your day up because you do have that runoff? You've seen guys go into the grass or correct and get back on the race. They can finish their race day. They're still going to have an opportunity to stay on the lead lap or get back on the lead lap and make something happen, as opposed to some of these street courses. We saw it, lap 1 ruin 3 guys' day.
Yeah, I think so. I think you do see that, but I can remember some pretty. I mean, Simon Pagenaud, for one, like, he's no longer racing because of a road course, right? Like, because when they take off, they're traveling at such high speeds on those road courses that if they do end up in a barrier, it can be disastrous. But yeah, I do think they're a little more aggressive when it comes to diving into turns. Keith, that's a good point.
For sure. No, great point.
And then the other thing I noticed from last year, watching several of the road courses, like you had mentioned, changes of elevation. To me, that's pretty thrilling to watch, especially with some of the sweeping shots that they have now with drones and things. And you can really see that elevation when they drop down into what they call a corkscrew style turns. Um, I don't know what that does as far as force on the driver. I would think it, just riding to some roller coasters and how that feels to me, what it would feel like to a driver, changing elevation, going into a turn and coming out of a turn at what did you say, pad 120 miles per hour potentially?
It's I think I think his Barber a couple years ago, Newgarden was towards the back. Not I think he's qualified 10th, and I don't remember the exact, but he hit somebody because he couldn't see over the hill at the very start, ruined his race.
Yeah.
So no, the elevation changes are a huge part of these road courses, especially at the beginning. But there's some, some of the G's that they're pulling in these corners got to be pretty intense.
And I think that, and maybe I'm wrong here, Keith or Pat, you can correct me, but I think a couple of things have kind of helped the casual fan understand that elevation change on road courses too. One, I think NBC and now Fox have done a really good job of highlighting tracks and in those specific places. I think NBC really took that to a new level. And then two, I remember the days before HD TV, and you started to see elevation on TV.
Yes.
When that came in, and before that I didn't realize, because I'd never been to a Barber or some of those other road courses where the Mid Ohio's, the Road Americas, all I saw was all I saw on TV, and so I thought they were pretty flat.
Right.
But you did talk about though the Indy GP and the Indy road course, obviously because it was built here in central Indiana, north central Indiana, Keith. I know down there you've got some hills and hollers, but up in our part of the world, it's pretty flat here, and when they took an old cornfield and made a racetrack out of it, it's pretty flat. But it's unique in that way, because there's not the elevation change that we see on most road courses.
Yep.
And good. Let's go into the ovals just a little bit, because like you said, that's kind of where IndyCar has made itself famous. To talk about some of them and some of the differences.
Yeah, that's what the three of when we go to racing, that's the three of us we've been to Iowa, Milwaukee, and then Dinwiddie and I went to Nashville on a whim.
St. Louis,
St. Louis, Barber. St. Louis is what we call it. So, so St. Louis, it's smaller at one end than it is on the other. Milwaukee is really flat for an oval. Iowa is it's more banked.
That's the short track on earth, right?
Yeah,
what they claim.
It only takes us 6.5 hours to get there, so the drive home is usually a little bit longer. But then I'm bombing this in explanation. Then would help me out.
No, I think when you think about short ovals, we're looking at something that's between a half mile and a mile in length, kind of a bull ring. You think about it that way, and that's how a lot of the guys like to. We take. Now we've got 27 cars, and you're putting it on a 3/4 mile track. It doesn't leave much room for error, and so if there's good side by side racing, it's pretty exciting. And it's just they're constantly under pressure. There's no release, right? Like. Right. I'm thinking about Iowa, where there's not a true straightaway where a driver can relax. Like, they're in it the whole time. They're constantly turning, constantly moving, looking for what's the next move and diving into corners. And but that's where you get your faster speeds, even though the course, overall length is shorter, just because they're able to keep their foot in it all the way around the track and really wears on those tires too as they're doing that.
This side-by-side racing, when these cars are back and forth for 10 laps, no joke. He led that lap. That's when it becomes so exciting. These guys are less than a foot in some circumstances away from each other on these laps, and going 200 plus miles an hour type of thing. At Texas, we don't run there right now, but Graham Rahal winning by inches, man. And so it happened in Sparta, Kentucky back in the day too, with with numerous drivers. It's awesome racing and those ovals, man.
And Keith, you mentioned kind of the history too. Like that's when I think about IndyCar, when I was little, when I was growing up and got involved in the sport, that's basically all they ran. Like, you'd have your occasional Long Beach or Laguna, but typically it was short ovals. I think about guys like Foyt and Andretti. That's how they made their names, the Unzers. It was just traveling around the country all. It's the same short track, Keith, that you have in close to your house. That's what these guys ran, and so that's what IndyCar was built on, was the short oval. And and then as things progressed and we got more of the European influence, then we started to see some of the road and street courses that we see in today's schedule.
And it's an art between both of those. Pelot still hasn't won on an oval, but he's a three-time champion. I think it took Power a while to be productive at ovals. So it's there is something to be said when your three-time champion still hasn't won at an oval. And McLaughlin just won at an oval last year, his first one. He's still pretty newish, I guess, but just says something. They are all different arts.
Yeah. And then you get a guy like Joseph Newgarden, who obviously is the king of the oval, right? I think Keith, you mentioned that in the previous episode. Like that's just the guy that every time you show up at any track, Joseph's going to be, a contender. But when we get to ovals, it's like, oh, it's Joseph in the field. Like, what's Joseph doing, and are you keeping an eye on him? Because no matter where he starts, or he's going to be there when it comes down to it.
Hey, you wonder how much that has to do with his own preparation. You look at the dude, you can tell right away he's strong. You talk about holding on to those cars at that kind of speed, and obviously skill as well. But he's obviously made a very conscious choice to what looks like the strongest guy on the circuit. He's a well put together dude. He's spent some time in the gym.
Well, I think, that goes to kind of the guy's background coming up. If they're coming up through sprint cars, they're doing a lot of oval racing. If they're coming up through kind of the European, the Formula 4s and some of that, then they're more tailored to road courses or supercars like McLaughlin came out of Australia or New Zealand with, So I think it comes from their background as well. Where do they come? Ferrucci came up in sprint cars, so he's really good on ovals, or has proven to be over the last few years.
Yes.
So before we move on from ovals, I do have a question. Yep. Why is there only currently one large oval, and why do you not see like the triangular shaped ovals that you might see in NASCAR and other places?
So I'll start with like the one oval that we or I'll call it, I guess we could call it an oval. Indianapolis Motor Speedway really is an oval. It's really a rectangle. When we talk about, those first three types of tracks, like IMS is really a mixture of all three. It's got those really sharp turns. It's got, the speed up, slow down piece of the street course, and kind of it can get tight, even though it looks big. The four sweeping corners. But then you've got the idea that guys' foot is to the floor, like they are on an oval, most of the way around. They get the drafting piece. So I think when we think about IMS, it's really kind of its own beast. And interestingly, like it was the first, right? In this country, it was the biggest and the best from the beginning, just a testing ground for cars, and it really has been that for over 100 years now.
I think. Indy's the fastest, but it's also the safest. Running at Pocono, IndyCar started to, things happened, and it was just too. These cars are just too fast to run on some of these courses. That's it's good for the viewership, but it's bad for the race car drivers in a lot of those situations. Going 200 miles an hour in turns when you're not at IMS, when you're going straight, where you could probably relax your hands a little bit. 200 miles an hour like this the whole time, it gets dicey, and it's proven to get really dicey. So I think they've taken a step back in some of those bigger speedways to where it's dangerous, man. We've lost drivers because of it.
Yeah. I think when you go back to, like growing up, before I went to the race at IMS, like my family would take me to Michigan. And, that was a 2 mile or mile and a half. I can't remember exactly how. I want to say 2 mile.
It is good. I think so.
Great track, great racing, great side by side. Texas, obviously, we've lost that in the last couple of years, but it's kind of stayed along. And then Las Vegas. I mean, they went to Las Vegas back in 2011. It was a great event. It was the season-ending event, and that day we lost Dan Weldon because it was side by side. And so I think when IndyCar looks at that, then it all comes down to safety. They talk about safety first, and Poco, you talked about Robert Wickens and what happened there. Like, we didn't lose with Robert, but Robbie, but we he's paralyzed now and hasn't been able to come back to IndyCar since. And I think they just want to make sure that it's the safest environment, and so that's why we don't see those big ovals.
Yep. But I mean, it's awesome. I mean, that's the right way to do it. We want to be fast, thrilling, but safe too. I mean, we don't want to lose drivers. We don't want to lose drivers.
I think we'd all agree we'd love to see more of those come back.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if they can figure out a way to do it, it'd be awesome, man. Because it just gives us something else to talk about on the podcast, if nothing else. It's not IMS. It's not a Iowa or St. Louis, and it's not a street or road course. It's a 2 mile, just totally different ballgame, I think.
So going off of the types, going off of, the different histories going back to different tracks, what is your favorite track? And, it may be sentimental, maybe it's not necessarily the racing that takes place. Maybe it's a special memory to you, but if you were to pick one that's not IMS, because it's gotta, it's the cathedral of all racetracks, you gotta go with something else. Sorry, we're gonna pull that one out from underneath of you.
That makes sense.
Says the guy. Well, I guess you have been to Indy. It's been a while, but you're gonna go back this year for the first time in many years. But yeah, I think we got to take that out of the equation first of all. Go ahead, Pat.
I mean, I've been to a handful of tracks, but I've been to, they're just all the same. We used to go to Sparta, Oval back in the day, my dad, brother, and I. Those were great races. St. Louis, it's good racing. My favorite, honestly, from what we went to last year was Milwaukee, man. Milwaukee was awesome. The racing was awesome. You're in the state fairgrounds. It all had to do with the racing, but you can walk from here to there, vendor setup and everything. The racing was bar none the highest or the highlight of the trip, but everything else just kind of, makes you feel warm, fuzzy, and this is really cool compared to St. Louis. Love St. Louis, but it doesn't have, you're not in the state fairgrounds of, of the track. So that's my favorite right now.
Well, mine will be probably a complete opinion only based on race day experience, not from the racing that took place. So probably for me, it would just be the first time just going to an event and seeing the event unfold. I know that we're all a little disgruntled that Iowa doesn't have the same sponsor for the race, and we're not going to have the same show put on for us like we've had the last several years. But to go to a race, pick a driver for the first time, be very curious about what's happening, go with really good friends, see your driver you select win out, and then also get to go have some of the best concert experiences I've ever had in my life. Even though Tim McGraw did not sing Where the Green Grass Grows, and I'm sure I still have not forgiven him yet. You're in Iowa. How can you not sing Where the Green Grass Grows? But seeing Blake Shelton up there, pull out Old Red, and just having a lot of fun memories. So for me, it's about the race day experience. But I have to agree, Pat. It was pretty exhilarating at Milwaukee last year, and the vibe there was great. Like the fans, and to be able to walk right out of the grandstand and go grab you some Millies at the bar and pull IndyCar drivers up to the stage and have Q&As. They did it right. We also got to plug our favorite watering hole there in Milwaukee, Pat.
Liquid Johnny's?
Liquid Johnny's, yeah. Right next to the campground. So you don't have to worry getting back to your camper.
We will be back. We're going to do the Milwaukee Brewers. They play that Saturday night. And then we're going to the race Sunday. So come join us. Come find us. Liquid Johnny's, yeah, be there.
Yeah, I think you guys mentioned two really good ones there with Milwaukee, and I would have said Milwaukee too, just because that was such a good event, and that was actually my first race when I was a little kid. So,
Really?
yeah, but I'll say Michigan. I would love to get back to Michigan. I really have some good memories at Michigan. I feel like high speed. I feel like it was one of those places that when I was there several years, like you wouldn't see, it wasn't just the dominant drivers. I remember John Paul Jr. winning a race up there, and Unser winning races, and Mears, and so I'd say that takes me back to the 80s. But I just love the high speed. I love the side by side, the battles that I saw when I was in Michigan, and just it's easy in and out. Like it's just a good track. So it's probably my favorite when it comes. I love ovals, but I love the big ovals better than the small ovals.
Sure.
So I'd love to get back to that.
No, it's faster, man. You're going faster. It's just in between the Iowa and the IMS. It would be awesome if they can get one. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So to stick to our format, which is our checkered short format, it's a double meaning there based off of the fact that we love to break out our checkered shorts going to the races, and also that we're committed to keeping you digestible short format podcasts so you can listen to them on your way to work, or while you're waiting for your grocery pickup, you're waiting after ball practice for your kid to come out. We want to stick to that format. We had another thing on there. We're going to roll that over to the next IndyCar 101. So, we're going to talk a little bit about schedule in upcoming episodes. And then we'll get into some technical things as well about the cars, about driver preparation. But the schedule is unique with IndyCar, and there are some things there that I certainly have questions about, and some things that I'm sure we're not privy to the decision-making that goes into all the things schedule. But we want to hit on schedule in the future. So we'll talk about this year's schedule. We'll talk about past schedules. But I think we'll have to save that for another episode.
Yeah, I think this was good. It was fun a little bit. We talked about it more than I thought we would, hence why we got to cut it short. But if you guys have comments, questions, topics you want to talk about, we don't know everything, but we can look it up if we don't know it. But I think the three of us are pretty versed in at least our opinions, and we have enough knowledge between the three of us to answer some questions. So if you have something out there, tune on in. We'll give you a shout out, man.
Let us know what your favorite track is. I have a feeling that Road America is going to come in, to our comments. I know a lot of people. I just haven't personally been to Road America yet. It's on my bucket list. But I've heard great things there. But if there are tracks, and I've not been anywhere out west, so. But yeah, please share your favorite tracks with us.
What was that guy's name that loves Road America? He's like the mayor. Turn 4.
Oh my gosh.
What was his name?
Turn 4 Bar and Grill. And then he also won some tickets. We saw last year on the IndyCar socials that he was walking in and got free tickets to some event. I can't remember exactly what.
I got a sticker somewhere out. If that's you.
If you're watching our podcast or listening to our podcast, drop your name in there. Remind us. We'll catch up with you this year back in Milwaukee, I'm sure.
That's still one of the positive things too that I've experienced at all these events is the camaraderie among the fans. You're not isolated sitting in the stands watching a race. People will chat you up. They'll share their passion and their love for the sport. So that's a lot of fun.
Yep. Good episode, boys.
All right. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you again next week, bringing in some episodes in this gap between action. So be prepared for more pods to drop in the future. Typically, we drop these things on Sunday night and Wednesday evening. So just spread out your viewing pleasure.
I'm sure.
All right, take care, everybody. Have a good week.
Thanks for joining us.